40 years ago, this pond was a rugby field, a landscape of dairy farming and a dumping ground for local industry. Then in stepped environmentalist Max Maddock with a vision to get as much people power as possible to create the Hunter Wetlands Centre here in Newcastle, New South Wales. Sadly, Max passed away in 2016. However, his daughter Michelle was with him every step of the way when Max established the site in the 1980s. So you've had a family connection here for quite some time?
Yes. My dad was working at the university. We had our horses here. And he was watching egrets come into the Melaleuca swamp. He recognised that it was a really important landscape and environment for the egrets, and joined with other friends to save the Wetlands Centre.
So re-establishing what is a really important ecosystem.
Dad didn't do it on his own. Over the 40 years, I can't imagine the number of volunteers that have come. 400,000 trees have been planted on the site. The wetlands have been revegetated because they were just grass on the edges, so there were no reeds.
Wetlands are doing so much for nature. They're filtering water, they're providing habitat. It's amazing how they're so undervalued.
They certainly are. 40% of the world's biodiversity is in wetlands, and they are more endangered than our forests. They are critical to our environment. And being part of the estuary, we have a lot of local estuary wetlands, and this is what we are here. Ours are really important because they're freshwater. Here we've got giant eels, we've got fish, we've got microinvertebrates, we've got the plant species that keep our water clean. It's just amazing the biodiversity that we have here.
To get a closer look at the biodiversity of the wetlands, I'm going for a paddle on one of the estuary waterways, guided by Jeff Nichols, a volley with over 30 years' experience.
This is a nice little creek system. Where are we?
Well, we're on Ironbark Creek, which is the main western creek for Newcastle, and it flows into the Hunter River at Sandgate, which then goes into Newcastle Harbour and the ocean. We're actually adjacent to Hexham Swamp at the moment, and there's 2,000 hectares of managed wetlands in there. Has been rescued to a far extent, enabling more tidal water to come in by opening the floodgates, and that's established mangroves to a far greater extent than they'd been there for a good 40 to 50 years.
And a lot of this has come back naturally with the tidal movement and the movement of the mangrove fruits in particular.
Yes, well, we're actually paddling through a cluster of mangrove fruits at the moment. Very interesting fruits in themselves, that they actually germinate on the mother plant, so they already have roots and a shoot before they fall off, which enables them then to be secure in the mud in a high tide and already probably start their establishment. So that's how come they can get established so quickly in a tidal zone.
So there's distinct layers in the mangroves, but also you can see the distinct species here.
That's right. And there are only 2 species, and you can see that with those distinct features. You have the rounder shaped leaved mangrove at the front there is the river mangrove, and then towards the back, the taller one is the grey mangrove. I mean, it's the one that has the pneumatophores, the breathing roots that rise up above the high tide mark.
Yeah. And
they also work well together in the sense that they both don't fruit at the same time, so they don't compete, you know, for the mud banks in getting established. In the Newcastle region, there was quite well known that the Hunter River prawns were quite a delicacy, but over time they disappeared, and the reason was because they didn't have these backwaters in which to breed and get established. So with the opening of the floodgates here in the Ironbark Creek system, it's allowed all these mangroves to get established, and they're a really great safe habitat for those prawns and other aquafauna that need sheltered waters and lots of detritus to feed on as well. So the healthy mangroves all mean also a healthy prawning and fishing industry in the Hunter River as well.
Local mob here, the Awabakal and the Warramai, they would have loved this area, I'm sure.
Well, yes, there's no doubt that this was a great foundation for living and culture over thousands of years. I mean, you've got rainforest and wetlands combined, you've got so much vegetation, as well as all the animals that live here, all the reptiles and the fish and the birds. It would have been such an abundant supply of food. There is talk that there were cultural gatherings here, corroborees, that lasted over many nights. We have a midden on site where there's evidence of stone tools that come from the Bar Beach area on the coast. So this would have been a gathering place as well as a place that supported life for a very long time.
Wetlands and the different types of wetlands provide a whole heap of services for nature, Jeff.
They do indeed. I mean, they're known as being a habitat for migratory shorebirds, for example. Also within our wetlands, they provide safe nesting areas above water for annual nesting of egrets and ibis. There's also a great supply of food for the birds in fruits and nectars that you find in the plants that grow around the wetlands.
The wetlands support over 200 species of birds. Magpie geese were locally extinct to the area, but after their reintroduction, they are now thriving. Take a walk in the wetlands and you'll see ibis or swans, along with herons, cranes and the rare freckled duck. The very start of Max's vision for the wetlands was plantsman Paddy Lightfoot, who didn't seem to have a lot of choice about being recruited.
So I was in the Australian Plant Society in 1983 and Max said, right, he said, you're on the landscape committee. He did not say, have you got time? I was working full-time in those days. Would you like to? No, just you're on the landscape committee. Here I am 40 years later.
And you're able to germinate and propagate a lot of the species that you have on site here?
We do. We've got two nurseries, one which is the Wetlands Nursery, and we have another nursery which is the Australian Plant Society Nursery, where we grow anything from anywhere in Australia to show people what they can put in their gardens.
Thinking about regeneration or revegetation, endemic species are crucial, aren't they?
Absolutely. We've planted different areas. We have a Melaleuca swamp with Melaleucas around it, Melaleuca quinquenervia, paperbark. We also have casuarina forest. Beautiful to walk through the tracks through the casuarina forest, particularly in the August westerlies, and you have the wind through the branchlets of the casuarinas.
And education really is key, isn't it? Just showing particularly those different zones, water-loving plants through the riparian, all the way into scrubland, bushland, forest, yeah?
This is very important. And of course, this was Max Maddock. He was an associate professor of education, and this was his whole scheme, was to educate the children. And that's the only way we're going to survive, is to have the young people educated.
And part of that education is valuing these spaces that for so long were just backfilled and saw as having no value at all, but they are just so crucial.
They are absolutely crucial, and the more population we get in dense populated areas, the more important these areas are for medical health. I'm a retired GP and I realise just how vital green spaces are for our future. One interesting bit I remember was a fella called Richardson Barb Baker, who was a forester from England, and he said if aliens came to Earth, they would say what they liked best was the green people, the trees and the plants.
I like that. Wetlands are an essential component of ecology and biodiversity. They're a sponge to help mitigate against floods, to filter water, and a haven for plants and animals. They are an invaluable natural resource to help us connect to the living landscape to which we all belong.